Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ersman. I am excited and grateful to be your host on this wonderful new little podcast that we're doing together, and grateful for your time with us today. Once again, we have a really fun episode today. I'm excited to introduce you to Aaron Hernandez. Now, I kind of feel like I have to say, if you're a football fan, it's obviously not that Aaron Hernandez. If you don't know Aaron, he's a great guy leading a really cool, growing church in Texas, right on the border with Mexico. And we had some really interesting conversation that I think you'll enjoy today. We talked a little bit about just what it's like to be right there on the border and how the immigration situation has affected his church. Really interesting to hear from someone who's directly right there dealing with this day to day, and talked a little bit about how the coronavirus is affecting his church. And then I also wanted to talk to Aaron. I mentioned this briefly last episode, but we're still in this time in our American history where race and justice and those things are still on the forefront of most of our minds. I know the George Floyd situation seems like forever ago, but it was only a few weeks. And obviously, the story of Black people in America is different from the story of Hispanic people in America. But since it was still on top of our minds for me and for Aaron, we got into a little bit about how racism has affected him personally and his church as well and his community. So even though it's totally different, we're not trying to say it's exactly the same. That's not our intention. But since we're thinking about race anyway, we actually bumped this episode up a couple weeks so that we could get this out and you could hear from Aaron, because I think he's got some helpful wisdom for white church leaders in the church today. So I really enjoyed this conversation with Aaron and felt like I learned a lot, and I think you will as well. So we'll take a quick break and get right to Aaron Hernandez.
Today's Lead Podcast is sponsored by Mennonite Central Committee. Refugees, migrants, and prisoners around the world are especially affected by COVID-19. In the U.S., people of color bear the disproportionate brunt of the pandemic. Jesus calls us to pray, give, and speak boldly for justice. Responding to this call, MCC invites churches and individuals to join us in faithful action. With your prayers and support, we care for neighbors near and far. Learn more at mcc.org.
All right. Well, hey, I'm excited for today's conversation. Right now, I'm joined by Aaron Hernandez, and we were just chatting a little bit here, and I'm excited for myself to get to know him a little bit better, and for those of you listening to get to know him as well. So Aaron, thanks so much for your time today. Grateful for your time.
It's an honor and it's a pleasure to be able to speak to you today, and of course, be able to have this lane of communication with our USMB family.
Absolutely. So Aaron, I think some people probably know you, but a lot probably don't. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You just told me you've got a whole bunch of kids at home, and I know you've got a growing church. So tell us about you and your family and your church.
Yeah, well, look, I'm married to my beautiful wife, Alejandra, for 20 years now. And in those 20 years, God has blessed us with 5 children. This year is a big challenging year. We have 2 in high school, 1 in middle school, 1 in first grade, and 1 coming into school barely. So that's going to cover all of them, right? So it's a joy, it's a challenge all the time, but family is what we love, and we really, really enjoy how God is using our family, not just amongst us, but be able to serve within the church, which most of my kids are already serving within the church. So myself, my background a little bit, I grew up as a pastor's kid. That was also challenging. That was a joy as well. Being a pastor's kid in Mexico, actually, my father was pastor for many years at a church where I grew up in. I served. I learned a lot. And this church was right across the border from where I grew up in. I lived in McAllen, and the next border town there in Mexico was Reynosa. So that's where we did life, is crossing the bridge every day, coming back every day, 2-3 times a week, because Hispanics like gathering for many services a week. And so we did that often, right? So it was wonderful. It was good, but it was challenging at times. But even in those difficulties, now that I'm a pastor, I was able to learn a lot from growing up with my dad, my parents, and hopefully doing it better, a little bit better this time around now with my family.
Mm-hmm. And I was looking up some information about your church before we started. And when you say you're on the border, you are literally on the border. So how far away from your church is the actual border to Mexico?
Well, living right now with my family and where our home church is at in La Gruya, Texas, and south of us is about a mile and a half, and the river is right there.
Okay.
So south of us, there's not a lot of city, not a lot of roads. There's dirt roads to get to the river, the Rio Grande River. So that Rio Grande River that runs through our area, our community is called the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, South Texas. So we're right there. We're not far. Our life is on both sides of the border, which is very unique to us because we are that close, and we still all mainly have family across the border. So that's part of our life, right? It hasn't gone away. We just didn't come to the United States and didn't go back. We travel before it might have been a little bit more. Now maybe once a month or once every 2 months to see family or anything. So yeah, it's a unique thing that we have by living right across the border.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking before, I know COVID has affected your church just like it did everyone else's. And you were telling me you have a second campus, but things have kind of changed. You want to tell us a little bit about your two church campuses?
Yes. So we have our main campus right in La Gruya, and then we have a campus that we started about 9 years ago. And, it hasn't, we've had up to 45 to 50 members that have been faithful throughout the history of that campus. But during the last year, of course, a lot of work and I was still the primary guy going and coming. So we kind of put a hold, and COVID came in. So we still have a following from those members online and are very faithful at times, even with their offerings still. So we're praying to see what's our next step with our McAllen campus. That's where it's situated at. There's still been a lot of desire from that group of members to want to start back up again. And we hope by the things that we've learned, we could have a better strategy when we kick that off once again soon, hopefully. So our Gruya campus right now is kind of the main campus right now, the only campus. Mm-hmm. And yes, we're opening back up hopefully by the end of June. And then within the year, hopefully the McAllen campus will also be able to start back up again. But, it's a campus that started with the encouragement of Don Morris during that time while he was the church planting agency, and he was heading that up, and he nudged us a bit, encouraged us, and God has been faithful. It's had some up and downs, but that's the way church is, right? Church cannot be without ups and downs. So we ask that you guys just be in prayer about what's our next step with our McAllen campus, and when we get that open up, we'll definitely be able to share that wonderful news again with our family.
Cool. That's great. And I know along with all those duties, it's not, 5 kids and 2 churches. If that wasn't enough, I know you're also really involved with what we call LAM, the Latin America MB churches. So you're the district minister for that. Is that right?
Yes, I'm the volunteer district minister. So a few years back, they wanted to be able to give us just, I guess, a stronger voice within our U.S. MB family. So they gave me that honor, that privilege to be able to serve as district minister from our LAM district. And, we have 9 churches, and it's a beautiful thing. Those 9 churches have been growing, prospering. As a matter of fact, I would say about 75% of our churches right now are in the process of remodeling or enlarging to a maybe new facility. So that's good signs of life within our district.
Yeah.
So we are grateful for that because it's movement forward. It's being able to see the needs of our community. So I have involvement with our churches, along with a wonderful group of people, our leadership here in the LAM district, to be able to help resource our churches. And of course, my one of my duties specifically is to be able to be a connection within our USMB family district. So I really am grateful for USMB just having that continued desire to want to know what's going on within our district, and also what are we thinking, right? How can we plug into the overall USMB family?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the main reasons I'm excited for this conversation is I feel your church is probably different from the churches that a lot of us attend, and you probably lead it differently, and your congregation might look a little bit different. So we have a lot to learn from you, and I'm excited to hear more here. as we dive in a little bit more. So before we started, you told me that your community is, I think you said 95% Hispanic, very large Hispanic community. So why don't you tell us what are just some unique challenges as you're leading a Hispanic community, maybe compared to what some of the other churches might look like?
Well, yeah, you see, our community, when we think about Hispanics, right, or any other race within our country, we kind of think linear, right, and everybody just falls into that pocket, right?
Right.
But there are different pockets, right, of Hispanics and immigrants that are coming from different countries in our day. We live right along the border, so like I said earlier, our life is on both sides of the border. So we have about 90 to 95% of our community is mainly Hispanic. Recently, we've had, because of growing jobs in our community within the medical field, within the Border Patrol and those agencies, a lot of people are coming from up north and different parts of the country to be a part of these jobs and seeking a better life or a better way of living. And so, yeah, we're beginning to have more of a mixture amongst us, but still predominantly Hispanic, very bilingual. We have the first generation grandparents that are very close to their heart of always have to speak Spanish, and that's the way it is. We have the second generation that is, we're still Hispanic, but we're Hispanic Americans now and have bilingual language. And then we have our third and fourth generation Hispanics, our children that they might not even know Spanish sometimes, right? But they want to be that Hispanic American that doesn't speak much Spanish, right? So we have that mixture amongst us, and I know it might be different maybe from some of our Hispanic churches that are up north, because they get sometimes first generation Latin Americans that just arrived from whatever part of Latin America and know English, trying to do life and get a job and trying to get their kids into school. So there are other groups and other pockets of Hispanics here that struggle more than what we are struggling here in
right.
South Texas. So that's a reality that we are fully aware of, and we never want to say, well, these Hispanics are like those Hispanics, and
right.
It's much different because, like I said, we live right along the border, and some people that come through our border but don't stay, they're traveling up north, they walk into communities where it's not maybe even 10, 20% Hispanic at all, and they have to deal with those struggles in their communities.
Yeah. And speaking of the bilingual thing, man, I watched, I don't know, 5-10 minutes of one of your recent church services this morning.
Oh, okay.
My goodness, Aaron, you are smart. Because if people haven't watched your service, it was amazing to me because you would speak maybe a sentence or maybe even a handful of words in English, and then you would translate for yourself into Spanish. You're constantly, every sentence or so, going back and forth. And by the time I finish this sentence, I'm not going to remember what I just said. But I was very impressed. I'm sure, you've just done it so long, it's probably second nature to you, but that's something that a lot of us don't have to think about is you're translating for yourself while you're preaching. And I was just very impressed.
Right. Yeah. So, most of us here in my area, because we have older family that is just primarily Spanish, and then you have your job and your school that is English, you're back and forth all the time, right? A lot of people have asked me, right, if maybe that are not from our community, and they'll say, well, how do you do that? Well, you learn it, right? It's just part of you. It's part of your growing up. But also I don't think about it when I'm preaching. It's just God gives me the gift to be able to translate in that way, because honestly, there are times where I'll look even back to one of my messages to kind of go see where I need to fix or something. And I'm like, how did I even know to say that in between the translation? Because I'll make my messages are in English. All my messages, I'll write them out in English, and I'm not practicing to translate them till I do my message, and God just blesses me with that gift. But most of us here in the community, we're able to go back and forth and translate in that way. But it's just something that our church needed. And our church enjoys because of the different generations that we have within our church. So as long as the church says that it's still good, then we're going to continue to do bilingual in that way.
Well, I was very impressed. And that's something I would not be able to do. So you're very gifted in that regard.
I appreciate that. Somebody actually told me, how you could up one, and they said, try learning sign language. And once you learn sign language,
Oh my goodness.
So my daughter is trying to teach me maybe a little bit of sign language and working on that together, maybe for some situation where it's needed, because we did have that situation a few years back where we had somebody that wasn't able to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, in my heart, I was like, oh man, if we only had somebody that had that gift, right? But I don't have to do it all. I wish somebody else could be able to learn that as well.
Well, still, it's very impressive. So I want to go back to something you just said, and I think it's an important thing for us to talk about. You said that, not all Hispanics are the same, right? Obviously, people coming to your church probably came, I'm guessing you have people from all kinds of different communities, and of course, not all Hispanics are the same. That every person is different. So is that, I'm curious, I'm assuming that's a misconception that maybe you feel like maybe the rest of USMB or the rest of the US maybe has this false perception. So I guess, first of all, is that true? And what are some other things that you hear on a regular basis from white Christian leaders that is just not true of your community?
Well, that would probably be the primary one, right? That we're all the same, right? Or that we all come from Mexico.
Right.
And right now, there are, I guess the majority might be that have been here for a while, have come from Mexican origin. But you have El Salvador, Honduras, you have all these southern countries that honestly right now, because of the situation they're living, they're coming, and we might have the same language. We have different cultures at times, different upbringings, different types of things that we grew up used to. Most of us would have a bent towards a Pentecostal bent at times because that's primary within the Latin culture. But there's a desire to be able to, especially with the USMB family, to learn God's word and be able to grow in that area, right? Sometimes because we have that bent or that training. A lot of us, I grew up in a Pentecostal church myself. You come in and there might be some differences. But along the way, you're learning and you're growing, and God is speaking to your heart. And I think many of us that are coming from Latin American countries have that desire, right? There's still this distinctive about us, right? We love music. We love to move. We love just maybe the music a little bit louder, a little bit more interactive, right? But that's something that I'm thinking for the different Latin American countries that we're all coming from. Even the styles of music are different and so many things. So, I would say to our USMB family, when they see Hispanics, when they see Latin Americans, we're all very relational, but we all have a different story also. There's something about us that is a plus, an added of where we grew up in. And hopefully USMB, as they have engaged Hispanics and Latin Americans, to be able to offer those gifts, right? To be able to put those gifts to service within our USMB family.
Absolutely. And just kind of a peek behind the curtain for people listening, we're recording this, mid early June, and this week, the George Floyd stuff is still at the top of the news, and everyone's thinking about racism right now. And right now, the topic of conversation this week is kind of whites and blacks, but I know that Hispanic racism is still very much a thing that our country needs to improve on. And so, again, you and I were speaking earlier that it's good news that you don't necessarily see a ton of racism in your community, but I know that you have faced that in other times of your life. Do you want to tell me about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It's very unfortunate, but at the same time, I think that these things really put a light on the things that we need to pray for our country, right? I think in our community, we're very comfortable, really, because we're primarily Hispanic, and most of us are comfortable with each other in that way. That we don't see a lot of racism, or we don't see none of this. I have experienced it, like I mentioned earlier, as I traveled out into the country in two occasions, where it's nothing major, but you did feel the slightness of somebody not recognizing you as a person, and I could just imagine just how many in our Black communities have felt this for many years. And I would say Hispanics also have experienced that as a whole throughout the history of our nation. yesterday I was talking to one of my daughters because they were showing the movie Selma on TV, and I was watching that, and she says, was it really like that here in the United States? And I said, it was worse than that. I mean, the reality of this is the movie, of course, depicts it in a certain light, but the truth of it is very harmful, right? And Hispanics for years have been the people working out in the fields, the people picking up the crops, and that's the labor that for many, many generations Hispanics have done in our country. And, some of those things from the beginning is you hear the stories of the suffering they had to go through, the lack of resources that they had to have to deal with, at times being fumigated on while they were still picking up crops. Those stories, that's part of our culture, that's part of our history. As Christians, we're called to forgive, and we're called to look at this in light of who Jesus is and what he's done for us and how we can better our life and our situation for our children. But, those things with people that haven't found forgiveness in Christ, they carry that, right? They carry that throughout generation to generation. And we see it now by many Hispanics maybe joining with their Black brothers and sisters and saying, hey, we're part of this too. We want to march also. We want to protest as well. Of course, the violence that has come out, we're not for that. It's unfortunate, right, that many people have to lose their businesses and a lot of what they worked for many years. But, protesting, being able to speak your voice and be able to say, hey, we're tired, we want change. Well, we're all for that, right? And I think Hispanic culture in our history has experienced some of this in many occasions, and we've had voices throughout our history that have spoken up during times in the earlier part of the last century. People driven out from Denver, from California, hundreds of people, right? Because of threats, because of so many threats that were being made towards families and their jobs and so many situations. So, it's reality, right? We're in it now. We have to face it. We cannot hide from it anymore. But, I would tell our USMB family, when Jesus spoke about who our neighbor is, right? And wonderful story about the Good Samaritan in the book of Luke. And he tells us basically, don't turn your eyes away.
Right.
If you're seeing it, walk over and be part of the solution for healing, right? So I think that's the first step. And I think our USMB family, sure, there's growth and there's much growth that needs to happen. But I feel that our leadership and our USMB family is taking great steps to want to understand, to want to learn, to want to say, what, we want to help in this change. What can we do? So, for me to be able to speak to our leadership and our leaders that are part of our USMB family right now, it just brings me joy and peace to know that I'm part of an organization of faith that wants to do something about this and be able to be a light for the future of this, not just because of what's going on right now, but be part of the change that hopefully we'll experience for many generations to come.
Yeah. That's so important. And you maybe just answered this, but I want to give you a chance to go a little bit deeper if you want to. Again, you and I were speaking briefly beforehand that I've heard some people say that maybe 10 or 15, maybe 20 years, maybe less than that, maybe 2 or 3 years, sometime there's going to be a wave of regret from white leaders, they're saying, of how we've treated Hispanic people in our nation's history. Like right now, we're kind of going through the African-American phase, and like, thank goodness, like we need to address Black racism, of course. But right now, no one's really talking about Hispanic racism, and some experts are saying that's going to be the next wave. And so I just want to give you a chance to address that even further. Like, what else for white leaders in the church? What else do we need to know? And how else can we help your community?
Well, one of the things about Hispanics and Latin Americans in general is that they are hard workers. They don't want to live off of anybody. They want to earn their wage. They're gifted. They have talents. They have resources to be able to say, this is what I bring to the table. And I've heard many times throughout the last few years, right? If Hispanics or immigrants one day choose to not show up to work, in the United States, then that's going to leave a lot of tables without food. It's going to leave a lot of industries trying to find new employees because they're doing a lot of labor and a lot of work that other people don't want to do. But these immigrants and Hispanics have said, you know what, we want those jobs, we'll do those jobs, we have the ability to do those jobs. So looking forward 20 years down the road, because of the situation that many Latin American countries are facing right now, this immigration is not going to stop. People are going to continue to come to the United States. So I would say, yes, on whatever side of the aisle you fall in, right or left, this is reality, right? This is something that we can get mad about and say, well, there's legal ways to do this or there's not. But once we understand the story of where these people are coming from, no medicine, no food, no security, no safety for their family. I mean, what would you do?
Right.
You'd go to that next country, right? You'd say, how can I better my family? So most of these families, I would say the majority, that's their desire. That's what they want. And I think if we open our eyes to that sooner than later, it'll be able to bless not only our churches, but America in general, to be able to tap into this talent and these resources and these gifts that our Hispanic and Latin brothers bring to the table.
Absolutely. And I imagine, a lot of people listening, probably have never been to the border. They've maybe never been to Mexico. And my perspective is different from you. Earlier, you said you go back and forth kind of all the time, and that's part of your life. And I'm sure most people in your church and in your community, like you said, they've got family and they hop back and forth. So I imagine when you're that close to the border, that close to the people who are having to face these things, your perspective is so much different from mine or someone who lives even further north than I do. So is there anything else about that you think maybe we just don't fully understand since we don't see it every day?
Yeah, well, we're not only, there's a side of this that many times we don't hear of, right? And this is the drug cartels, the people that are responsible many times for bringing these people over. In other words, you cannot cross the river or cross in any certain way without one of the drug cartels knowing about it. Mm. So many of these people, they leave their home with this desire to better their family. But on the way over here, they face a lot of abuse. Mm-hmm. They face a lot of difficult situations. Many of them die on the journey. Many of them they came with their whole family, but only 2 of them made it because either some of their family got kidnapped and they're gone. And I really appreciate in our community, we have a strong Border Patrol agency, and we have relationship with some within our church that are Border Patrol agents, right? So we appreciate the work that they do to be able to help people that are in danger, people that are suffering when they're crossing and stuff, right? So their job or desire is not, we just want to send you back. Their desire, their purpose is to be able to help people that are being abused and mistreated. So, we live in a community where you have helicopters going through our area every once in a while. You have Border Patrol trucks all over the place. That's just the way it is. But, we don't see it in the light of, oh, they're the enemy. No, we see it as they're doing a job of rescue, and they're doing the job of being able to help these people maybe gain access to citizenship or some type of level of legal authority to be here. But at the same time, many of them are Border Patrol agents in our community, which are Christ followers. They have faith. They're not the enemy. They're part of trying to be the solution for this. So I would say for our whole family, many times we kind of want to divide both of them. We want to put some Border Patrols on one side and the immigrants on one side. But in our community, we see them as part of the solution, right? Being able to bring access or doing their job to provide these resources for people that are struggling to get here and have gotten here with so much difficulty. And for them, I've heard many stories of some of our immigrants that have crossed, and the moment they see the Border Patrol, it's like, we need help us, because it's just been so hard. In our church, about four years ago, it was a Saturday night. Since we live right on the border, right on the edge, we had a group of about 30, 40 people that walked in to our social area. And they just said, look, we want to turn ourselves in. We've been walking for days. We don't know where we are. Our children don't have food. So you multiply that by many times throughout the week, right? Or even sometimes throughout the day in different areas of our border across the United States. So, there's difficulties, right? And as churches, we're there to serve, we're there to help. But I think the USMB family would be able to see that not all Border Patrol agents or agency is the enemy, because we don't, in our community, we don't see them as that. We see them as people that want to be part of the solution to help our immigrants get to a place of safety, basically.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. So again, your community probably looks a lot different from a lot of ours. So I'm curious, how is your church able to meet some of these needs? Like, is evangelism and spreading the gospel, I'd imagine, to people who are looking for this new life, they're coming here, the gospel probably sounds, or you might need to present it differently than to people who are maybe in a church further up north in the country. Is that true? Or how else is your church helping meet some of these needs?
Well, with all immigrants coming over, right, especially with the Hispanic culture, Latino culture, we're very relational, right? Mm-hmm. So establishing relationship, being able to meet the needs of people where they're at, providing certain resources. Some of our churches within the Lam District, of course, deal with these issues as well, with people that have not moved on from our community, which is usually the desire of many of them that come through our border. They're looking to go up north, but there are some that stay in our communities here. And it's an opportunity for our church to be able to meet them in that area of understanding where they've left their family, they've left everything they've known for all their life. But now there's a church family, right, that can provide some of these resources and be able to help them along the path of having a stable home or having a family that they could count on, right? So even personally, I've had family come over because of the difficulties in Mexico. And it's real. It's nobody's making this up. It's a hard life, and I wish the USMB family would be able to understand that part of the story, right? That they're not leaving their country because they just want to make another dollar. They're in that country because it's death or life for many of these people.
Yeah. And I imagine. So I'm sorry. How long have you been a pastor with the USMB family?
For coming up on 14 years. This month, 14 years.
So I'm curious, as you've kind of grown in leadership in the USMB world, and you've been around for a while, have there been some times where maybe you had an idea that was different from kind of what the normal USMB church planting or even pastoring world was? Or what kind of challenges has there been as the Hispanic culture kind of increases in our USMB family? Has there been some of that along the way?
Well, I guess there have been two things, right? Primarily, it's language. I know still today, USMB is making efforts to be able to have a translation for all the resources that USMB provides, right, to our churches. There's that. That is continually growing. Our faith and life brochures and all those things are being translated over to Spanish. I think one of the things that we need to work on is our main voices, leaders within our USMB, to provide another avenue where there's translation for those teachings and those types of maybe seminars or things that I've been blessed at times also with Multiply, has some good conferences and good resources available. They're all in English, right?
Right.
Understanding that there's a bilingual or language need within our USMB family, it'd be good to make a little bit more of an effort to say, how can we translate these resources so they could just be there, right? Available and ready for our Hispanic churches that still have that big language barrier. And another thing that USMB has working hard on is giving other languages and races a place at the table. And not only, maybe in previous years, it was more come and be with us at the table. Now it's more, we need you at the table.
Yep.
So that conversation has been transitioning from come and be here with us to we need you here. So that is a huge plus when you're trying to deal with not only Hispanics, but now Congolese and Ethiopian and our diverse USMB family. It's being able to say, hey, you have something that we need, and we want to be a part of us, not as an extra, but as a whole, right? So we want you to engage with us at the level of others as well. So there's still some growth needed in that area. I was saying in another meeting that we've had, the church has been too comfortable for so many years. I'm talking about church in general, but I think also USMB has been comfortable, right? And it's not USMB's fault. Our founders, our main churches have primarily been white churches. There's no fault in that, right? At all. Right. But now that we're transitioning and we're beginning to grow into a diverse USMB family, the efforts that are being made as they continue, I think it's helping a lot. And it's really inviting us in a way that maybe before we didn't feel that invitation coming in.
Yeah. So I'm curious how, obviously not all of our communities are like yours, where it's 95% Hispanic. So what can other churches do? And a lot of churches, it's not their responsibility to translate USMB things necessarily, but what else can we do just on a local church level to better serve our Hispanic brothers and sisters?
Well, one of the things, and maybe some of our other areas, right, is resources. And I'm not talking about just financial resource. We have to understand that there is some financial hardship, especially now because of COVID-19 and closure of churches that exist. But there are some very gifted churches within our USMB family that have wonderful resources as far as different ministries, youth ministry, evangelism ministry, these different types of resources that are already made for their local churches. If there was some way maybe that we could unite in that area of saying, that these resources are already there, how do we translate these? How do we maybe change them up a little bit to make them more towards the need of the Hispanic or whatever type of community? So I would say that that might be something that we could grow in, and how maybe our Anglo or white churches can begin to say, we don't just want a ministry that is bilingual within our church or as Hispanic community within our church. We're willing to bless other churches as well, because not all churches have a mother Anglo church or have a partner church within our USMB constituency. So that would be a big plus for some of these larger churches that can begin to provide this type of resource for the many churches that are Hispanic in our community.
And I love what you said earlier about having a seat at the table too. And that's something that I think a lot of churches probably have some room for improvement, is having some diversity in their decision-making boards or volunteers or whatever that looks like. I think that's an important thing we need to improve also.
Yeah, and we've, some of us that are already at the table, we feel welcomed. We feel that when they ask us a question or they tell us, how do you see this? There is honesty, there's humility behind that, and that just gives us more of a desire to tell our families back home in our church communities to say, hey, they're real about this. They really want us at the table. They have this desire to grow in this area. So I think Don Morris's leadership and the many that are around him right now are going in that direction, and we're grateful for that desire.
Absolutely. And, I was talking with my pastor earlier this week, again, just about all the racism riots and stuff that's happening as we're recording. And I just hope that we can, if nothing else, I hope the good that comes out of this season is just conversation and just a willingness to talk about this stuff, and a willingness to admit that we've made a lot of mistakes and we need to do better. And the church isn't immune to that. And so I hope there's more and more conversations where we white leaders recognize, like you were talking about, that we're one body. We need all of us. Different groups bring different gifts. And I just hope there's kind of more and more of an awakening of that as part of these conversations. And hopefully we can, a lot of the big change that needs to happen in this country, it's going to be one-on-one, right? I don't have a whole lot of change to change our country, but if I change and improve how I have one-on-one conversations, and if everyone listening does that, that's how we're going to be able to chip away at this long term. So I just want to affirm you, Aaron. I'm grateful for your leadership, and we need more people like you. So thank you for your leadership. And we've probably gone over time already, but as we're beginning to wrap up here, how else can we be praying for you or your church, or what other kind of last words do you have for us that we need to hear or that we can improve on? What else would you like to share with us?
Yeah, well, being part of the USMB family, not growing up in USMB, learned a lot. I've grown in my understanding of our Mennonite brethren faith, our Anabaptist, evangelical distinctives. But one of the things about our family is that desire to be a blessing to each other. I'll tell you this story. A few years back, I was at one of our study conferences. And sometimes you know quite a few people, but then, of course, there's many you don't. And I was at one of the hotels, and we were getting ready for our meeting, and a gentleman from the Central District came up to me, and he goes, "Are you Aaron?" And I said, "Yes." And from this church? And I said, "Yes." And he says, we don't know each other. He says, but our church prays for you and your church every single week at our prayer gathering. Mm. And that really, it just melted me. It was one of those moments when you're like, I'm part of the right family. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we might not have the one-on-one conversation. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we might not be able to sit down at the table to have these conversations, which I know they need to happen. Mm-hmm. But praying for each other, encouraging each other, and just having this desire from God to say, if we become more diverse amongst, and that's what's happening within our USMB family, well, that's a picture of heaven, right? Mm-hmm. So the more we look like what heaven's going to be like, the better I think we're going to be off as a USMB conference. So there are some uncomfortable conversations that need to happen. And I would say from my side of being a Hispanic, we humbly need to come before our brothers as well, because we have been blessed for so many years, so many resources that have started many of our churches from our white Anglo churches, and they've invested and they've given for so many years, not only their resources, but families have come down and started our churches. And so we need to recognize that on our side and be able to say, hey, it hasn't always been bad. Mm-hmm. There's been so much good that we've been blessed with and benefited from. So it's not just the other side has to come. No, we have to also, Hispanics and Latin Americans, have to come with an attitude of humility, an attitude of saying, we recognize what you've done. We recognize the work that you've invested in our communities, in our churches. And now we want to grow together, right? So I'm just grateful for the history of our USMB family throughout the generations, that many years ago, in our case, almost 75 years ago, they sent a family from Oklahoma to come and start our church here under a tree. And they were harassed. They were spoken badly about, trying to kick them out of our community. But their faithfulness endured. And now we are here almost 75 years later, and the gospel of God is still reaching out into our community. So, it's both sides. Yeah, it's not just one side. And we want to, as far as me personally, I need to recognize that and come to the table with an attitude of saying, okay, how can we grow together from this, right? So really appreciate all that USMB family has done for our different communities.
Well, this is going to sound really cheesy. I don't mean it that way, but the little subtitle or the slogan that USMB has been using lately is increasing impacts together, right? And that's what this is all about. Like you bring gifts, I bring gifts, everyone brings gifts, and we're going to do the best work if we all do our own parts and work together on it. So, man, Aaron, I know you're in a part of the country that's, unfortunately, it's going to be hard for a while. I don't see, the immigration stuff's not going to magically be fixed tomorrow. So I encourage everybody listening to keep Aaron and his church in your prayers. And our country has a long way to go. So I hope we can keep working on that together, making some improvement. And yeah, your voice is important, Aaron. So thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
Although USMB Gathering 2020 was canceled due to the coronavirus, we invite you to join with Mennonite brethren from across the United States as we gather online this summer to be challenged, inspired, encouraged, and empowered for increasing impact. Mark your calendar for July 22nd through the 24th and log on to participate together in worship, dynamic webinars, and business sessions. And watch for lead pods featuring speakers scheduled for Gathering 2020. The podcasts will release July 17th, 24th, and 31st. Visit the USMB website at www.usmb.org for the schedule and registration information.
All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Aaron as much as I did. I just think he's a great guy doing a really good job with his church in Texas, and I know he had just a lot of important reminders for all of us who are white leaders in the church today. So this time that we're in is difficult, and race and justice and equality are kind of ratcheted up a little bit, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful that we're having these conversations, and I hope that in the next few years, it might take longer than that, but hopefully eventually the tough conversations that we're having today will hopefully lead to better country and better churches down the road. So I think this conversation was a good start for a lot of us, and we've still got a long ways to go, but again, I'm just grateful that our country is in this time that we're in, and hopefully we can come out of it a little bit stronger. As you just heard, we have some upcoming podcast episodes from the speakers who are lined up to speak at the convention this year. I actually just spoke a couple days ago with Katie Cole, who is one of the convention speakers, and I think you're really going to like that podcast episode. She had a lot of really helpful and insightful things to say about raising female leaders in the church today. I really enjoyed that conversation. That'll be coming your way soon. And I think coming up next, we actually talked to Krista Weens, and she had some really interesting and insightful information about human trafficking. And that's another area where we can continue to improve, and she had some really great things to share. So lots of exciting episodes coming down your way soon. So I hope you are subscribed. If you haven't yet, please do that so you don't miss an episode wherever you're listening today, and we will keep these shows coming your way. So thanks again for listening today, wherever you are. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.